Uber and Lyft. The applicant proposes to also install an electric vehicle charging station, and the project will comply with the current edition of the California Building Codes, Green Codes, and Energy Codes. A bicycle rack accommodating 8 bicycles will be located near the southeast corner of the existing structure, and the applicant agreed to provide a minimum of 4 shared bicycles on site for motel guests, and that the motel promote their availability when making reservations online. The property owner will also be required to pay transient occupancy tax, also known as TOT tax, to the city. The existing residential structure constructed in 1911 was assessed by the city's historic resource consultants, who determined that the structure is a significant historic resource. Therefore, the applicant chose to preserve the historic integrity of the structure and adaptively reuse the building as one of the motel units. The registration office within the front structure will be operated by a manager daily between 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., who will assist with concierge services. Oh, sorry? Yay. Tenant check-in and check-out and daily cleaning of the units by an outside cleaning service. The motel units will be smart units where the renters will be able to access information and pay online. They anticipate having 1 employee on site daily. The city prepared a revised initial study and mitigated negative declaration for the project, and the project will not have a significant impact on the environment with adoption and certification of the MND and implementation of the mitigation measure to ensure that vibration levels do not exceed damaging levels at the property line of the adjacent residence. And a detailed monitoring program is required that will ensure vibration is reduced if it reaches certain levels, and that's included as a condition of approval. Based on the analysis above, staff finds that the revised project addresses the Commission's concerns, and the proposed precise development plan 19-2 and parking plan 19-2 as conditioned are consistent with the applicable sections of our code and Plan Hermosa, and staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt the attached resolutions approving the precise development plan and parking plan and adopting the mitigated negative declaration. We did receive numerous public comments on this item, some of which were received prior to us posting the agenda, so they were attached. Others were received after posting the agenda, so they've been added as supplemental, and they've also been printed out at the front counter for staff to view, most of which were concerned with parking and traffic impacts. And then we also have the applicants here tonight who are able to help answer any questions you guys may have. So that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Do any commissioners have questions of staff at this time? Start with Commissioner Hoffman.
Well, the questions I have, assuming, assuming we're considering the project as it's submitted, they're showing an office in the existing building. Would that building or that office have to be ADA accessible? And is it in the plans as shown?
It's not. It would actually have to be ADA accessible per the building code, and most likely they'll have to put in some type of lift if needed. I don't think a ramp would fit in that space, so it most likely would be like a wheelchair lift.
And for the main building then, the main existing structure, as a hotel with that designated use and so forth, does building codes, do health and safety? I mean, obviously they'd have to retrofit sprinklers, but beyond that, are there conditions that would not ordinarily apply but would if we're converting this? And can that building be converted realistically? I mean,
yeah, so with it being a historic structure, there's limitations onto how many retrofits can be made. So, for example, like sound dampening and fire rating and insulation and stuff like that, and window treatments, they're pretty much exempt from those. So that'll be probably an inaccessible unit, and the accessible units will be in the back detached unit structure, which will have an elevator and all those accommodations.
well, I think they're showing the ADA accessible unit as the ground floor in the proposed new structure, but the existing structure that they're suggesting, that they call it what, the playroom, convert that to an office. wouldn't that have to be ADA
Yes.
accessible?
Yeah, for
And
the
you're
guests.
saying the ramp or something, okay. All right.
Yeah, in order to check in, to allow guests to
Mhm.
access the site.
Okay. Anything else for staff?
No.
All right, Commissioner Rice?
Thank you, Chair. Nicole, thanks for the report. I have a couple questions. So the historic building at over 1,629 feet, backing out that 212 square feet for the registration area on the first floor, that's a really big unit with multiple bedrooms. So my first question is how many occupants are allowed by code in this front unit?
We haven't done an occupant load analysis on it yet, but that will be required at time of building plan check. Our building official will look at the occupancy, which would be a motel, and determine how many people can safely occupy that unit.
So as of tonight, there are no limitations.
Yeah, it would just be what the building code would permit.
Okay. The staff report indicated that one manager will be on duty from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. daily. And there's no mention of accommodating that employee's parking on site. Was there any conversation about that with the applicant?
So you guys may recall that the original project that was presented, we had the tandem space designated for employee parking only, the back tandem, and that the non-tandem spaces be for guests of the office and retail uses. But because the check-in staff is not expected to be there full time, we didn't want to have that locked in and have it designated. I mean, if the check-in staff did ideally work locally and rode their bike in, we didn't want to have it be off limits. So just to allow flexibility for them to use the spaces as needed.
So at this time, there's nothing designated for employee on site. How about for that outside cleaning service? That's going to come in daily to clean the rooms per the report. Are those the parking for those outside workers accounted for and accommodated on site in any way? Was that addressed?
So nothing has been designated for an employee or cleaning service. It's all just for as needed for guests, employee, and cleaning service.
Okay. Was there any conversation on how the tandem parking might be managed? Okay. A quick question about the front porch. I should make an ex parte. You didn't ask, so I'll come forward to that. Now, I did visit the site today and just did a visual look at it from the exterior all the way around from 10th and from Hermosa Avenue. How will that front porch on the historic unit be utilized? I was there today and observed 3 chairs and a 3-person bench. So right now it's set up for, looks like 5 or 6 people sitting. So is there any mention of the activities there or limitations? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the front unit, it could be rented out to 1 person and it could be 2. But of course, how many people can safely occupy the space would be determined by our building official at that time. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, a quick question about the supplemental on the Inlue parking program. Thank you for attaching that. That's good information for us to have. So on that chart, it shows that we have projects approved but pending payment. And that the one project enumerated there is 906 to 910 Hermosa Avenue. And it has 16 spaces in lieu. It looks like it was approved in 2007. So because they're not paid for, that means they haven't been enacted. So am I right about that?
Yeah, but in effect, they've claimed them, they're spoken for.
They're spoken for.
So we've included that in the calculation.
Okay, so this was in 2007. Those still exist?
That project is, as you know, is under construction now. They're probably about halfway through.
Okay, so those are still active, and we're assuming those will be
They will
paid for and be activated so
Right.
that the inventory then comes down by, it's actually in the number on the top there. So, okay, it's included in the 34.
Right.
In that project, also the way the condition was written, it says payment for parking in lieu must be paid prior to building occupancy.
Okay,
You'll see the conditions have changed a bit over time where we want the payment earlier. Like, for example, the cleaners with the Baker, Burton, and Lundy, that condition's a little different. It said payment of parking in lieu shall be paid, I think, before permit issuance. It was different, so that's why we got that one fast.
okay,
This one was written.
okay. And then just the last question in this area, there's asterisks there that state that the Planning Commission approval at that time was based on a 7 parking space deficiency, based on a 3 to 1,000 ratio. But later Coastal Commission required 11 more spaces, so took it to 16, using a applicable 4 to 1,000 square foot ratio. So the question is, just for the record, this project is also in the coastal zone, and Coastal Commission, is it possible that this project could require this project to have more in lieu than the 2 proposed here?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, but I think that what happened with the 906, 910 Hermosa project is our parking ratios changed from when it was originally approved and when
Yeah, that's correct.
their permits were.
But I guess in answer to your question, I'm not aware that the Coastal Commission has any different parking standards for motels. But as we've addressed to you before on the issue of things that are going to the Coastal Commission for permit, it's speculation, and I don't anticipate more, but they might have some other rationale as to why they might want to require more parking. We just don't know.
Okay, thank you. Last, I guess I want to ask, because we're using hotel and motel interchangeably, but in our code they actually have different definitions. So my question is, it seems that this report is written, well, the project says motel on it, but it seems like we're applying the standards for motel rather than hotel, even though our hotel definition is 1 or more buildings containing 6 or more guest rooms. And then there's additional language, all rooms accessed through a common entrance, and project shall include a registration lobby manned on a 24-hour basis. Motel, 1 or more buildings containing guest rooms, daily services of linen change, towel soap, which also applies to hotel. Such facilities designed and used for automobile tourists or transients, and shall include registration checkout service on a 24-hour basis. So am I right to think that you wrote this as a motel? How did you support that finding? What were the differences that you found that applied motel versus hotel, and what were the differences?
The difference is the common entry.
So the guests are not all coming in, they're going to come in through the room from the historic structure through the living space and back to the...
That's why it's not considered a hotel, because there is no common entry in this facility.
Aha, okay.
Like a common
So it was
lobby.
based on the registration, or whatever we're calling that, at the back of the historic structure, rather than on 10th Street.
Right.
So how do they get there?
The-
How do they get to that area?
To the check-in spot from the parking?
No, just to check in. I mean, it says check in, so how do you check in?
So you would park in the back off of the alley and then walk to the front check-in along Hermosa Avenue.
Okay. And there's no signage yet that they've asked for or shown us? Okay. That concludes my staff questions for now. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Seaman, do you have any ex parte disclosures to make, and also any questions of staff?
No disclosures to make, but I did want to clarify the parking a little bit, if I could. So, as I understand this, the parking requirement is based on the number of units. We have six units, 6 parking spaces.
Correct.
Even though one of them has more bedrooms and therefore more occupants, that wouldn't make any difference as far as the parking is required.
Correct.
Okay. And tandem parking is allowable for this. Obviously, it's here on the plan. And
So tandem parking is not a permitted method of parking by right. You have to apply for a parking plan, and then the commission could determine that it's sufficient parking for this type of use.
Okay. And so 4 spaces, one of which is tandem, 2 of them in lieu, and that is for tenants, for the occupants of the motel.
Correct.
So
and,
there's...
And
as-
is for all functions.
Right. As
Yeah.
Commissioner Rice pointed out, there is no, nothing allowed here for employee parking.
It's not designated exclusive for anyone. It could be an employee, it could be the tenant tenants, it could be the cleaning service, and it could rotate through as needed.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I understood, but the point is, I guess, is that there's 4 spaces here and 2 Inlue spaces. Where are the employees supposed to park? Because they can't park in these spaces, because in the summertime, when this motel is full, all of these spaces will be occupied by renters, by tenants. And so there's no place for employees to park. Is that
So, Nicole, did you speak to how many employees they expect to have here and what
It's
time?
one. Yeah,
It's
they're
just one
expected to have
employee.
one employee.
Okay,
Yeah.
the report does say 5, a possible 5. I don't know
Page is that?
who those 5 people are or why.
I don't know if that's a.
Page
I
2?
missed-
Page 2 of 12? Yeah. I know it said it in here.
If it does state 5, that it should be a typo. I'm pretty sure it says 1.
Yeah, I did. I'm sure it was in here. I just can't find it at the moment. All right, well, it makes sense that there would be only 1 for the most part,
Yeah, and they'll be there part-time.
because this is a motel, they do not have to have someone 24 hours.
Yeah,
Okay.
where most of the check-in and stuff would be online.
All right. And then,
Yeah.
of course, cleaning people would be another story, because they would come and go. And there's no other possible employees.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, that's all the questions I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. First off, I did visit the site. I didn't have any other offline conversations, and I appreciate the thorough questions of my fellow commissioners. I did have a couple of questions just following up on the comment of Commissioner Rice. The code says that, and again, maybe it's semantics, we'll have a registration checkout service on a 24-hour basis. What I'm sensing here is there's some sort of a remote check-in with like a lockbox or some sort of phone-enabled check-in. I don't know. Can you put some color to that in terms of what specifically they're doing? Or if not, we'll ask the applicant in a second, but I just want to first.
Yeah, the best, probably ask the applicant would be the best thing to do.
Okay. And I guess that's really just one other sort of small question on the drawing A2-11. There's a lockable surfboard rack for 6 boards. Getting in and out of that space, if those 2 parking spaces are taken, is just a matter of someone sort of squeezing between them and inhaling, or, okay, there's not another. Yeah, okay. But there's not another, I just want to visualize there's not another, like, a door or passageway there. Okay, all right, and that may be good enough. All right, unless there are any other questions or comments, we're going to begin the public comment portion of the hearing, which will start with the applicant. So if the applicant's present, and he is, if you can come up.
Chair, I have one quick announcement
okay,
that came
okay.
from our audio
Okay.
team, that
Absolutely.
everything is serviceable. The DVD's working, the feeds to both cables channels
Wow.
are working, as well as the online feed, so
Okay,
everything's
fantastic.
good.
So both those people at home are now.
Yes,
watching.
now joining us in progress. If you could sign your name, I know we have it obviously through our information, but just for the record, and then whatever presentation you have, and then after that, we'll ask any questions of you.
Good evening. My name is Dean Thomas, and I've been involved with the project since the time the property was purchased. We really appreciate the staff and the Planning Commission's direction last time we were here. It was obvious that parking had become quite an issue for the project. We had extensively worked with the planning staff, CEQA, Turnbull and Page, the historical consultants, to come up with a design in the back, new proposed structure that would complement the house. And we actually did look at adding more parking spots to the new structure. However, it would have put the building on stilts, and it wouldn't have, in the eyes of the consultants and everybody, wouldn't have kept the historical value and integrity of the architecture of the main house. So we did take that into serious consideration. As far as the handicap access to the concierge garage, when we were at the meeting last time, when we submitted our previous project for commercial, which we felt like for commerce, office space was definitely in demand to service residents and people who come into the community. But because the parking didn't work out, there were some concerns about the existing neighbor being a little bit loud and being a little festive, and not a lot of control on that and checks and balances. And that's why we created the concierge room downstairs off of the main house has got a billiard room currently. So it's basically you put a wall up there on the existing joist and it will change it from a billiard room to an office. And that was so we can help the tenants that are in the property, help them in and out, easy access, help the conversion of cleaning, all that happen without too much confusion or disruption, if you will. The access to that room is currently it's a double door slider, and it's 36 inches off the ground. So putting a ramp in there so ADA will have access to the office will not be an issue, and if that was a prerequisite in the plan, it's something that we can certainly deal with. I would like to address the concern of the occupancy in the ratio in the house. The house is currently a one-bedroom with, on the second floor, let me step back for a moment. When you walk into the house, there's a dining area, a sitting area, and a kitchen, and a bathroom. Then you go upstairs, there's one enclosed bedroom, and then an open area where I guess you would say kids would stay, right? So it's not set up to where there's 2, 3, or 4 bedrooms. It actually, again, has one private bedroom with an open area that will accommodate bunks or side-by-side beds, if you will. So we don't expect that property would even sit more than 8 people, to be honest with you. If you look at the 2 in the master, 2 or 3 upstairs, and then 2 downstairs if they use a fold-out. The 24-hour service, I'd like to address that. The concierge service and the management company that we've talked to, they will be on call 24 hours. So even though they're only at the property between 9 and 1 or 9 and 2 if necessary, they will be on call 24 hours. So if one of the tenants do have some kind of an issue, they'll be able to send a text in and get a rapid response and assistance there. So it's not like people are going to be left without any assistance. And then on the tandem parking, I'd like to, we've worked really hard to work with the city and come up with a plan to maintain that historical resource. We did have options to do an EIR for further development, and me and my partners are from the community, and we thought, let's do everything we can to accommodate that, because we actually think that it's really a benefit to Hermosa Beach to have that historical resource preserved. So in that, to accommodate the parking and the tandem situation, there were questions to Nicole about employee parking. Is there a designated employee parking, so on and so forth. If the city would like to have one of those 4 parking spots designated employee, my suggestion would be the inside of the tandem parking, because we would have access to move the other residents. I don't think it's necessary to make that a mandate personally, because the employee's only going to be there 4 hours a day. Then everybody else will be on call. And I'd like to share this with you as well. My partner and I went out to 30 plus merchants in the community, from the day spas that are around, the salons that are around. We went to the yoga studios. We went to 8 different restaurants to talk about how we're going to have the local merchants interact with the tenants that are staying there. And it was all positive response. We didn't have one. We invited people to come down to the community if they wanted to voice their opinion on it, but it was really an overwhelming positive response. And again, I think this project is a compliment to the community, and I appreciate any other questions I might be able to answer.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Rice?
Well, I'll just do one follow-up then. So you made a comment that you don't expect more than 8 people in the front historic unit.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner, wait, hang on. Rob, Commissioner Seaman, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, and just a question. So in terms of the check-in, there's somebody who is perhaps a property manager, real estate agent who is nearby that would be sort of on call or?
100%.
Okay, and they would?
There's actually, we know that in our communities, we don't like Airbnb to be here, but there are companies that manage those type of
30-day rentals?
operations, 30-day rentals, if you will.
Okay.
Based on our conversations with the management companies, they're definitely willing to be on call 24 hours, but more importantly, we think the concierge service is a complement to the community, right? It could be concierge service for just the people who are staying there, or it could be concierge and information services for people who are coming down to Hermosa Beach and just want to know where to go, what's going on in the area. So we did add the concierge service. That was a function of the concern about wild parties, this, that, and we're going to make sure that this is a 4 or 4+ star kind of environment, not some kind of, I'm going to say lower level type of service, type of facility. Any other questions?
I do not have any, no.
Actually,
Okay, Rob?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. So there, I understood two things, I think. You said that there will be someone 24 hours a day that will be available, but not necessarily on site.
Correct,
Is
sir.
that right?
On site, we expect them to be between 9 and 1 and 9 and 2, and then available 24 hours a day.
9 a.m. to 1 p.m. or
9
1
a.m. to 1 p.m., correct, sir.
To 1 p.m., okay.
9
So-
a.m. to 1 p.m., you're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 in the afternoon? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So typically in a motel, and I'm sure we've all stayed in one at one time or another, you come in and you've been driving all day to get from somewhere, and you have a room reserved here in this hotel. Mm-hmm. You show up at 11 o'clock at night to check in. You phoned in ahead of time, we're coming, our room's available, everything's great. So you get there at 11 o'clock. What do the people do? They pull into one of these 4 spaces and then ring a buzzer or call a phone number and
No, they'll
someone
actually go
comes
directly.
over?
All of the units are going to have direct access from outside. So if you're going into the house, there will be a
But
security.
don't you need to check in?
No, well, with the automation these days, everything's done online. It's paid before they get there. When they get to the property, they'll have a combination to get into their room, and they put in the security, and they walk into the room.
Okay, well, this last weekend I stayed at a Holiday Express. Walk up to the desk, give them a credit card, you sign in, you do the whole rigmarole, you get your keys and so on and so forth. It's not going to be the case here.
No, sir, and in fact, we stayed at a bed and breakfast. We've actually, since we've been involved with this, we've been staying at some other kind of boutique inn kind of facilities that are more smart, and we went to Ojai. There was a 8-unit place, and we gave them all of our information before we got there. They gave us the code to the security door, to the door when we got there. We put in our code, and we went in and enjoyed ourselves.
And that's what's going to happen here.
Sir, correct.
Okay.
For the people who want it to happen like that. We will be having, though, a formal check-in and formal reception area like we discussed in the morning between 9 and 1.
Okay, so again, it's a wonderful summer weekend. The place is full occupancy. All 4 of these spaces have tenant cars in them, and presumably 2 other tenants are parked in a parking lot somewhere nearby or on the street perhaps, but at any rate. And the cleaning crew shows up to do their cleaning. Where will they park?
They will park in one of the available parking spots on the street.
On the street?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
One of the statistics that I just heard earlier was in non-peak parking, and I take a lot of photos down there and I visit the property often. In non-peak parking, I heard that it was 50 to 65% occupied spaces. That means there's 45 to 35% spaces available.
On 10th Street?
On Hermosa Avenue and 10th Street. Hermosa Avenue more so. 10th Street's a whole another challenge there. It's a 2-block street and you have the Sea Sprite down the street, but along Hermosa Avenue and the public parking facility that Hermosa Beach has, we believe when it comes into that type of situation that it'll be accommodated. And then the other side of, I think, the conversation is with the new technologies of the ride-sharing, Lyft, Uber, and whatnot, 35% of the people are taking Lyfts and Uber from airports and taxi from airports to hotels, and not driving their own cars into the facility. So this is, Hermosa Beach is a very community-friendly walking, riding area, and we don't expect people to really going to have to use their cars that much when they get here.
Right, but that means 65% of them are driving their own cars. And this is a motel, meaning that this walking, biking area that we have here in Hermosa is beautiful, and I agree with you. It's a wonderful place to live. But these people don't live here. They're coming from somewhere else. So they need to get here in some form of transportation other than 35% of them in Lyft or Uber. And so they're going to be using these parking spaces, and I'm just curious how this tandem parking space is supposed to work. If there's a tenant in the front space and another one in the behind space, and the folks that are parked in the rear space are off on the beach having fun, and this person wants to get out of his car, out of the parking lot to go to Disneyland, how do they do that with a tandem space? When these are tenant spaces and one person is going to be blocked in by another car, sooner or later it's going to happen. So how is that supposed to work? How do we, what arrangements have been made to
Well,
make that parking structure work?
The solution that I could think of off the top of my head would be have the interior spot a designated employee spot.
But
I don't know if that's the right solution, though, because it takes away one spot from the tenants, but that
Exactly.
might be the solution.
Yeah, I think we're kind of going backwards when we do that. If the tandem space was employee parking, but we don't have a permanent employee 24 hours a day, so
Well, that's
kind of a
why-
waste of a parking space to have an employee space that's not being used most of the time. And then now there's only 3 spaces on site rather than 4 for tenants. See what I'm saying? So by using it as an employee space, we're kind of going backwards.
Well, that's why we didn't submit it as an employee space and left it open to be utilized as it's needed, right? So, with the concierge service coming daily, it would hope to mitigate that parking problem, but I can't say I have 100% of the solution there on how, with the 4 parking spots, it's gonna rotate. I mean, that's for the employees and for the tenants.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay?
Okay, I have no other questions. Thank you.
You have no other.
I have no other questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
No other, yes. All right, at this point, if anyone from the public wishes to speak as part of the public hearing, come on up. You have 3 minutes to speak eloquently on the topic. I know we have at least one, I guess, maybe more. I think I know who you are, but if you could please sign in.
Certainly will. Thank you. Hi, Aldro Lundy, Baker, Burton, and Lundy across the street, and also 934 Strand. So that's right at the end of 10th Street. The main thing, we like development. We're not against the development here. What we want to require is adequate parking. And I don't know if you know, if you went down and how you get to this place, this proposed motels, which is a motor hotel, that's why they call it motel, is you go down 10th Street, you make a left turn, we used to call it the alley, it's now named Ocean, and you make another left up the alley, we used to call it, it's now 10th Court, because our house has been there since the 30s. We have parking behind our house, and it's a nice lot, meaning we can accommodate all the people who live there or visit there, but it's radical in terms of the amount of illegal parking that we get. This will be the invitation for those people who don't have a parking place, as Commissioner Seaman has said. Where are they going to park? They're going to park in our backyard, essentially, which is very concerning to us because it's difficult to get illegal parkers. They park their car in the middle of your lot, and then you have to say, well, I'm going to ticket them or tow them. But that's bad karma. And not only is it bad karma, but when we've done it, they know where we live. And so they vandalize our cars, they vandalize our building. It becomes really ugly because that's a $500 pop when you tow away somebody's car. We put chains up, they take the chains down, or they run over the chains, one of the two. So for us, this is a scary proposition. Not the development, but the parking. The close encounters with violence, where people illegally parking in your lot when you tow them or when you ask them to leave, is not good at all. And both here at the office as well as at our house, it's ugly. So we really, really want to make sure there's adequate parking at this location. One of the things I did when I found out that this was going on was I consulted with two excellent architects, Louis Tomorrow and Doug Leach, who have built lots of Strand homes. And they said, well, what's the problem? I said, all the Strand homes we're building now, we put lifts in, right? There's these fabulous lifts, don't even cost that much money, can cover it, no problem. You can put 4 lifts in and you're done. And you don't have to stilt or anything else. So we wanted to make sure that was important to understand. And really there's only, as you've said, 2, because no one's talked about the handicap parking. You have to have a handicap parking space there, accessible, so the tandem's not going to work. So we really only have 2 parking places there. The lift would work. The other thing we wanted to do is just quickly, it's not realistic that you have an internet without anybody there for check-in purposes. You got to have an employee there. And where does the cleaning person park? I mean, we live on 10th Street. There is no parking on 10th Street, and there's no parking on Hermosa Avenue, any of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else? Yes. Come on up, sign in. You have 3 minutes. Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Carol James. I live at 60 10th Street. We moved there in 1954, and just like this gentleman just said, parking is a huge issue. And I wanted to, I don't care if you say, you know, you have to park here, you got to park there, whatever, parking lot access and all that other stuff. We have parking meters in front of our house. It doesn't matter. During the summer especially, it's 5 months out, and when with all these different things going on, it's like the 405 freeway on 10th Street, like during rush hour. I mean, it's just back to back, and people drive around looking for parking spaces. I have had to park on Hirondo when I was just 10 bar. I'd park on Hirondo. I'd come home at 2 o'clock in the morning and have to walk from Hirondo to 10th Street to get to my house because there's no parking. There is absolutely no parking there. And I think it's just ludicrous for them to say that. And if you have 8 people in the front, how many people are going to bring their own car? They're not going to carpool to get there. I mean, it's just crazy. And they need to have parking. There is no parking there. And that Inlue parking, you know, we talked about this last year. You know, there's like, and so what does that do for us for the parking situation? It doesn't give anything to the solution. You know, it doesn't. They don't provide more parking. They say, okay, they can park in the parking lot, but that's not what they're going to. If they can find a place in front where the parking meters are in front of our houses, that's where they're going to park. They're going to park in the quickest ones they can, or they're going to block somebody's driveway. There's not that many there, but they block driveways. I've seen people. I mean, it's crazy down there. And I know. I think you went down and saw how people scrambled to get parking spaces after the street sweeper comes. It's crazy. And that's the biggest issue, you know, for me, is that, you know, the parking situation. If you have 8 people in that front house and you got 6 of them bring their own car, where are they going to park? Right, there's not enough parking for the residents, much less people visiting, you know. And I don't know where they got their figures about, you know, how many people drive their car or how many people ride bikes. Yeah, there's a lot of people riding bikes, but come down there when they have the concert or something, and it's just back to back. I mean, the traffic is just outrageous. I mean, it's crazy. And people just, I'm kind of like, I'm sorry, I'm kind of beside myself right now. I'm just kind of like, I can't even believe it that you even consider building a place without having adequate parking. You know, those parking rules were set up by the city, right? By the city officials, you know, at some point saying this is how many parking spaces you need for this type of business. We have the Sea Sprite. It's a giant. It's a big motel. It's been there for years and years. They're redoing it, but they have a lot of parking down there, and they have employees, and there's got to be employees there. If somebody can't figure out how to work the where you check in over online and stuff like that, it's just crazy. You know, and I live there, and I have to deal with this. So it's really. I mean, I'm just really upset over it. And I hope you'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Good evening. My name's Cheryl Main. I'm a resident here in Hermosa Beach. I actually came here to speak to another agenda item, but every time I hear hotel, motel, parking, I shapeshift. And and then I'm standing here. You know, we've heard over the past few years with all the hotels that are happening, we've heard a lot of creative ideas for parking, and that tandem thing keeps coming up. And I appreciate the questions that you're asking, because if something doesn't make sense, it's usually not true. And I try desperately to make sense of it. I mean, to think that a family will come to Hermosa Beach for a week without a car, maybe with 3 or 4 kids, 2 kids, whatever, 5 people altogether. They're going to Uber to Disneyland. That's going to be their main mode of transportation. That's not realistic. And that really is not realistic. But if we're going to have this type of thing, this Inlue part really kills me. I mean, well, we're going to pay you, and then we can just take the parking away. We know that the biggest issue we have in this city is parking. Everybody complains about it. Nobody has enough. We have people parking on sidewalks. We've got all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So now we're going to take and place a motel, which, you know, I can't even go there. I'm just assuming that it's happening. But a hotel and no parking. And then, again, another creative thing that we've heard before is that, well, nobody really works there. Okay, nobody really works there. So if the cleaning people and the people checking in and the person at the desk all show up at the same time, where's everybody going? And to think that I would rent a place so that I could park 2 blocks away, I'm just not understanding it completely. Parking isn't a big issue. I think we really, really need to look at the bigger picture of how things are going to be affected with all the changes that are already happening here in Hermosa. And every time we take something away, it's gone. We don't get it back. And we're not getting less people here, that's for sure. And we have a big hotel coming in, and we have a smaller hotel, maybe. So anyway, I just ask that, once again, you really think about this. I think they need to go back to the drawing board about the parking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl, did you sign in?
Probably
Okay.
not. But I am now.
I appreciate your honesty. Does anyone else wish to come up and speak on this item? All right, at this time from the public, okay?
I'll sign in when I'm done. My name is Scott Jarris. I'm one of the partners in the development of this project. I'm the silent one out of all of this, but I got to tell you, I am a seasoned entrepreneurial developer, an entrepreneurial person who have run many, many companies in my career. And I can tell you that this project has been a disaster from the beginning. Every step of the way, we have attempted to meet the needs of the city, taking guidance from the development organization and the city planners. We've presented 3 plans. Each one of them comes out with, yes, this is good, we've met all the criteria, and then we come here and it gets shot down one more time. And at this point, I'm so frustrated with the process of how we go about getting this stuff done that it causes me to wonder, what is it you want done with that property? Would you like us to just paint the house purple with dots on it and make it an eyesore so that you can all just look at it every day as it is? I don't think so. We've come up with 3 great ideas. This is the latest iteration that we've gotten approved by the city. And now we're thinking about it's still not what we want us to do, and maybe we should go back and rejigger the idea. This has cost a lot of money, a lot of patience, a lot of time. This is 3 years in the making right now. And at this point, if possible, I'd tear the building down, put a fence around it, and then you could decide what you want to do with it later. That's just not fair. It's not fair to us as investors who are trying to make your community better. And it's not fair to the community as a whole when we're trying to improve it for the sake of all of the citizens. And lastly, it's not fair to us as investors in this property because we keep getting jerked around one way or another with new ideas and new plans, and then every time it always comes back to parking. I would ask this commission, all of that money that goes into Inlue parking, I believe there's $3 million in the bank right now from Inlue parking. Do you ever have an intention of building a parking garage with that money? That's what it's for. Why don't you solve the parking problem as a more global issue for the city of Hermosa Beach rather than burdening developers such as us who are trying to make the city a better place to be? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Dean, if you have the ability to provide further comment or.
I want to tell the neighbors that I really appreciate the comments, and the idea that the gentleman put forth with the lift is a really good idea. I didn't know if that was permissible in commercial properties in Redondo Beach. We are involved with a lot of residential development as well, and we do install them in homes. And if a lift is permissible, we would install one. That eliminates the employee parking. The employee gets elevated up. When they're gone, they get elevated out. Now, again, I don't know if that meets commercial codes, but it's something we would certainly entertain. And the other idea of the concierge service, and Mr. Seaman, you brought up what if someone's at the beach and they can't move their car and so on and so forth. We would have the concierge service stay there from 8 to 5.
I'm sorry, what?
From 8 to 5.
Okay.
To eliminate that type of problem, to help with the congestion. That was the purpose of the concierge service. So the idea of the lift or an extended concierge person there to help flow, if you will, that's something that we would definitely put into consideration. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this point, public comment, public hearing is closed. I will start with Commissioner Hoffman in terms of our deliberation.
You know, I guess I'm looking here and I'm frustrated looking at my own notes from what I made before this evening as I was reviewing this project, and then the additional comments that we've had tonight. And I will borrow again from the applicant's term. I'm as frustrated as they are, believe me, that this project is coming back with the process, appreciating everything that he said. What really frustrates me, I guess, with this, and it's no secret to my colleagues and to the planning staff, it really began with the designation of this as a potential historic district. The house shouldn't have been painted purple. It should have been bulldozed a long time ago if that's what the investors chose to do. And I say that, everybody knows me. Lives in a 1920 bungalow that I bought intentionally because I wanted to live in a 1920 bungalow. My kids are counting the days until it's a 2-unit condo, which is what I really bought, the property, the entitlements are that. And I'm shocked, frankly, since I'm starting this little rant, that none of the other 5 property owners down there have raised this issue. They're in the same boat, and someday their heirs are going to be dealing with the same problem. That having been said, however, the issue comes back to it. It's exactly right, and the frustration comes back to parking. And the last application we had, those who were not part of the deliberations recall that the project was, as the applicant indicated, going to be a mix of commercial and office. That was probably a much more sensible use for the property located where it is in the commercial district downtown. It certainly would benefit the development, what we are aspiring to in our general plan, were there a row of retail establishments on Hermosa Avenue, which would have extended in for a number of reasons. That's what I think a lot of us envision downtown becoming. The problem with that, of course, is that required even more parking. And so the applicant, I don't want to paraphrase, but basically he said, we're responding to what you said the last time. And they did exactly that. I would add, not only have they responded to what we asked for last time, but they've gone to a fairly extensive revision to come up with a building which is historically, or architecturally at least, sympathetic to the existing building. They didn't have to do that. Has no bearing on the quote-unquote potential historic resource part of this. Those of you who live on 10th know the properties on the back half of your lots have nothing to do with the bungalows that are in the front. And so they've made a good faith effort to do this. And again, my frustration is that I go down 10th Street like everybody else here probably does 1,000 times in a given year on my bike, and one thing or another, I come down the hill there. But anyway, parking is the issue. This, I hate to say this again, and we heard there's a consideration. Yeah, what if we did do a lift? What if we, I don't know. See, we're not architects, and the process part I get. I just don't feel that, one last thing before yeah, there's, you're staying on Holiday Inn Expresses. You got to upgrade a little bit, Rob. There's a lot of places now where you never see anybody at the registration desk. It's all on your phone. You ought to go to the theater someday. They don't give you tickets anymore either. But anyway, I'm being a little facetious. I mean, I think the logistical part of it, as far as all that goes, yeah, I get that. I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable that we don't need, Bellman and a front lobby and, all those kinds of things anymore for this to work. Those of us who are familiar with the north end of Manhattan know that Seaview is spread out in, 4 different buildings over 2 different streets on both sides of Highland. This kind of a situation can work. But damn it, we got to come up, and as someone commented a second ago, the ADA space, we have to have it, absolutely have to have it. And I don't begrudge that, but we have to be realistic and recognize that may be vacant 30%, 40%, 50% of the time. And so we're really looking at effectively 2 parking places for a 6-unit hotel. And one last point about that, some of you I know are saying, that doesn't make sense. How could you only have 1 parking place per unit? If you have a hotel of a scale, if you got 50 rooms, you're going to have 20% of the people that aren't going to be, and that's plenty of room for your staff and for maintenance and all the rest. When you start shrinking down to 6 or so units, you don't have that extra 20%, it disappears. So that's part of the problem here. I apologize, but at the same time, I can't approve the project as it's proposed with just 4 spaces, effectively 2, given the tandem and given the handicap spaces as presented. But I think there's a solution here in terms of how mechanically and by some tweaks that you could change the parking requirement.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. Commissioner Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. I concur with much of what you said. First, we're as frustrated as applicant. We like projects to come in and these projects to move smoothly through our processes and for projects to get underway and be completed. And so this is very frustrating and hard news to deliver. But I think you may have guessed from my line of questioning that I have the same kinds of concerns about I believe that even at 6, if you had 6 spaces on site, I might be concerned. But as we've heard from public comment, as well as from up here with 1 as an ADA required space and 2 tandem with no plan for management, and I specifically asked that, I don't think a solution is to call someone to come in from off-site to move a car around. I don't think that's what a guest would want, so I don't think that would work for anybody. I am concerned about the occupant rate of 8 people in that front unit. I just don't think that's covered by 1 car in anybody's count. So if this were to come back, I'd like to see solutions to the things that we've asked. And in fact, what I noted on the plans is that while the new building showed furnishings with beds and chairs and desks, the historic structure had no such furnishings, which then made me think, I wonder if they could put a fold-out bed in the living area and then you could get it to 10 or 12. So because there wasn't detail, because the line of questioning we had earlier didn't sort of relieve my concerns, I too think it's underparked. I think it's in a very congested area where we already have concerns. The staff report, in fact, pointed out that 75 to 95% of the parking in that downtown area is busy exactly when your guests would want to use it. So I feel like they're going to be driving around looking for places to park. Their rented car or the one they may have come in. The fact that there's no accommodation for the employee parking or the cleaning services parking that will be there every day is concerning. The 80A space is not, while required, we're glad it's there. It's going to be underutilized. The tandem will be underutilized. No one's going to want to park in the back for fear of being parked in. And then again, I had questions about how we even determined this was a motel, but you guys answered that. It was about that registration, check-in and check-out. So sadly, I am not going to be able to support the project as proposed. I think we did hear some solutions. I'm not aware of a lift being used in a commercial space to satisfy a parking requirement, so we'll look to staff to investigate that. It's not on our books for residential at this time. We did a exception to that in one particular case in a residential, but nothing commercial. So unfortunately, you know, I'm sad to hear of painting purple and dots and tearing it down. I'm very appreciative of the attempt to preserve the structure, in contrast with my colleague who doesn't think it's historical. You know, that being said, I think I've enumerated well my concerns about the project, and I won't be able to support it as presented. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Seaman.
Thank you, Chairman. I also appreciate the fact that you have gone to great effort to architecturally, not exactly match, but to blend with the existing house in the front. I am a person who supports historical buildings and trying to save them. I believe that even though this may be, it's not a historical landmark, but I believe that the property owner has the right to do whatever they want with the property, even if it is a historical building. And I'm a firm believer in property rights. And I appreciate the fact that you've gone to great effort to try and save this building. And it might be that the best economical reason, possibility would be to not save it. I don't know. That's entirely up to you. But let me just say this. The way this is now, I just can't agree with the parking structure. That seems to be our main problem here, as everyone else has said. And I would like to take this comment one step further. I've lived in Hermosa Beach for 45 years, and I go by 10th Street and Hermosa Avenue all the time in that area, maybe once a day, maybe 6 times a week, whatever. And I have to say that 10th Street and Hermosa Avenue around the Magic Club, Comedy Magic Club, and that whole area there is almost constantly full. 55% at off-peak. I can't see that at all there. The last time this was here, I went down there and did a little survey at the last project that was presented for this address. I went down there, did my own personal survey. I luckily found a parking place. I sat there and watched, and a parking person would leave a parking space on Hermosa Avenue, and within 10 seconds, another car would pull in and take it. Same thing on 10th Street. There's the Russian roulette we play with the street sweeper on those crowded streets. It's parking in that area. There's a reason why they call that the critical zone, because parking is critical there. There isn't any. Most of these older buildings, these wonderful bungalows we're talking about, have no parking. They've never built a garage. They had a horse back then when they built a house, and so there's no place to park. Over the years, of course, we keep trying to make that better and better and better, which brings us to this project. I can't, in all honesty, approve something that to me seems to be underparked when what we're trying to do is improve the parking in Hermosa every chance we get an opportunity. The tandem space, as I pointed out earlier, I think is just not practical for a motel for this use. And then I'd have to say this, one more thing. The idea of a lift. A lift is tantamount to tandem parking. And the fact that if you have a lift, one car has to move out of the way in order for the other car to get down and get out, and then that car has to go back in and be raised, and then another car can come in, and you're shuffling cars the same way you would with a tandem space Only if you put a lift in the front space and the back space and the tandem space, it'd be twice as bad, because you'd be shifting 4 cars around. I don't think a lift is any more practical than tandem parking for a motel. So I'm sorry, I apologize. I know that you've gone to great efforts, and this is a very expensive project for you. And as Mr. Hoffman said, perhaps there's a solution somewhere, although I don't know what it is at this point, somewhere in the design of this. Perhaps more parking can be provided on site. But the way things are right now, I'm sorry, but I cannot support this project.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Seaman. I would just add to the comments that have been shared so far. Specific to the parking, there are 4 spaces, but given the tandem, given the ADA space, sort of 2.5, practically speaking. I understand the comments about a lift. They're not, to my knowledge, allowed, and certainly the thought of having a lift at a spot that's at a place that's otherwise unmanned seems a bit tough, bit of a head scratcher. And I mean, this is a challenging location, and direction is given by staff. We are the ones that approve it or not, and we're in a tough spot, and we have to look at input from everyone, knowing that what parking is in that area. And I would concur with Commissioner Seaman in terms of difficulties of finding parking on Hermosa Ave. Also, given that there's a approved office project essentially across the street that's going to bring a lot of other occupants as well. There's always this head scratcher of how many people Uber or Lyft, or in the future what's going to go on, we don't know. I do concur that for a motel where people come in to hang for a week, there needs to be, for 6 motel rooms, you would expect there would be more parking than that. It's a tough spot to develop, but I can't support this as proposed tonight. So given that, does anyone have a motion?
I had a question of staff. Remind me again the advantages if were I to propose that we continued this item versus a simple no vote.
A continuance would, if you could give some direction to the applicant, give them the opportunity to make some plan revisions to address your concerns.
One additional thought, in order to deny the project, we would have to bring back a resolution of denial at the next meeting. It couldn't be effective tonight because we have to list out your findings for denial. So no final decision for a denial could be made this evening. So there's a few weeks.
And then, of course, it saves them the step of having to reapply if you think there's an opportunity for them to come up with a plan that you would find acceptable.
Well, I can't speak for my consensus or the commissioners as a consensus, but I think it's pretty clear what the direction would be to the applicant to give some additional thought to how to address the parking. And that might come as a compromise architecturally, aesthetically. It might be a stilt building like the Chamber of Commerce is immediately to the south and so on. Not that any of us, again, as I say, I'm more frustrated. Well, I'm as frustrated as I suspect the applicants are by this conundrum that we have created from I won't go there. That should never have come up.
Okay, specific to any guidance you have, is there anything really specific you would want to see? I mean, we hear it's underparked, granted.
Yes, I would specifically want to see on-site 6 units. And whether the lift, we say that about a lift.
Six
I mean,
spaces.
yeah, 6 spaces for the 6 units. Whether or not the lift, I don't off the top of my head know code, but anybody who's been to New York knows that lifts are as ubiquitous as the parking places are in California. It can be done and it can be operated in all kinds of different situations. It might be that 2 of them are in Manhattan, that they be designated for employees and that the other 4 be available for the units. Again, I'm not going to design the project on the fly here, but I think it's pretty clear what the issue is here. The applicant, from my perspective, has gone above and beyond trying to address what we have requested of them, and yet we keep coming up to the loggerheads on this one issue.
Okay. I would say that I would support a continuance. It's a tough site. We're not here to say no, never. We're here to try to work things out. I don't know if something that could be continued and brought back would meet with my approval. I was not, no, not at this time. Not at this time. Let us get through first, then we can decide. I was disappointed that your partner, was a bit less conciliatory than you, and then walked out, because quite honestly, I mean, we're in a tough spot, and we're trying to find compromises. And if we didn't enjoy this, we wouldn't be up here.
No, then we can leave.
Yeah. Well, next month maybe. But so we are trying to come up with solutions and provide guidance. And anyways, I would support a continuance if there was, if you're open to it, just as some way to sort of try without a guarantee to get something that's a little closer.
Chair, may I ask the attorney, so are there any, we've talked about the positive aspects and opportunities that continuing this would bring applicant. There's a cost savings and a time savings, because the application is then still active, and they would come back with a set of plans, talk to staff. You've heard all our comments. Is there anything downside that we're missing here? Is there any negative aspect that we haven't considered, to rather than just deny and have it come back?
I think we should, if you're open to hearing from the applicant, I think you should see if he's open to one more round of looking at this parking again and revisions, and then we can decide what is the best approach moving forward.
Okay.
Okay, Rob, do you have any additional thoughts or brief thoughts on the?
No, I would, if it's an advantage to the developer to get a continuation rather than a denial, I would be all for that. I don't know if they would be able to make that decision right now tonight to say that, well, if we're going to change it, we might want to just change everything and do something completely different, and that would be up to them to do that too. But I would be in favor of going in either direction that they thought was the best thing for them, would be to continue it or just for a denial.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I'll add that a continuance for new ideas could mean 5 units instead of 6. It could mean, I've heard some concern about the front unit, if there was some modifications to the front unit, including the porch, so that it maintained its historic aspect, but perhaps the porch was smaller to allay some concerns about.
Porch is the defining architectural attribute of the house. We can't mess with that.
Okay,
if
well,
we're concerned about retaining its historic resource.
If there's 23 people there with Bud Lights, they may not be admiring the architecture. So I'm just saying that some of the concerns raised, getting creative in terms of what we want to do.
Well, and I think you and I are in agreement. What I just heard, one space for every unit on site.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it has to, the parking has to reflect how it's actually going to be used. And we're not coming up to that point. Did you have a question of council, or do I have a
Lauren,
motion?
City Attorney asked, and so how do we have applicant back out? Do we reopen public comment? And then
Just
close?
reopen the public comment to see if he's open to another round of project revisions.
Okay, I'll briefly open the public comment if you have any additional.
Briefly is good enough. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
So I appreciate the opportunity to have a continuance, but I'd like to bring to your attention the problem that we have here. We have an 1,850 square foot building, single family home that's been a single family home for 110 years, 109 years. The city rezoned the property to commercial, which basically, if you take one parking spot 4 parking spots for every 1,000 square feet that are there, and there's 1,800 square feet there. That would necessitate 8 parking spots for any business that went into the existing structure, which will not fit on that lot. So if we try to keep the house and just rent it out to a coffee shop and tell them to park back there, there's no room for a coffee shop. There's no room in parking for an existing commercial structure with that improvement. Now, we've been involved with the California Environmental Protection Agency, short for CEQA. While we were dealing with CEQA, we have gone through all of these conversations about preserving the existing building, but if there's not enough parking on the land for the existing building, what do? It's the city that changed the zone to commercial. It used to be residential. So if it was residential, there's no problem. You build a home in the back and there's 2 garages and it's simple. But the parking on the lot doesn't accommodate the existing historical structure that we're trying to preserve. That's a huge dilemma. So actually nothing can open there except for a single family. At least if we do a continuance, if we add 2 more parking spots, now they're all tandem. That's the way the math works. So when we're talking about having tandem parking, which is a problem, I know the proposed project's going to have tandem parking because it's the only way it can be done. So there's a problem with the zoning and the existing structure, and it's complicated. But if the continuance was the way was offered, we would take it and analyze it, knowing that staff has to understand that the parking comes back tandem. There's no other way to physically put it on the property.
What happened to the exploration of a new design with the stilts? You said it would accommodate parking, but would change the look of that back building, which Commissioner Hoffman pointed out, the buildings in the back really don't look like anything in the front. So just throwing that out there, what does it look like?
If we did it on stilt, that would still necessitate tandem parking because you can only access from the alley. You can't put any curb cuts along Hermosa Avenue to enter that property. Everything comes from the alley. So again, it's knowing in advance that it's going to be tandem parking if we resubmit. I mean, if that's something we have to go back and consider, and we would like the opportunity to come back and get the extension, but knowing in advance, there's no other option for parking there except for tandem if we added the 2 spots, which I still think is manageable within the employees and the occupants. But that is a problem. If we don't take a continuance and go that route, then we have a really interesting situation, and not only us as the owners of the property, but the city does, because the parking doesn't accommodate the existing structure, which means what can you do there? So,
may I ask you a quick question?
Yes, sir.
You said if you wanted to use the front house as a coffee shop, let's say, or a restaurant or something, you can't get, and that would require 8 parking spaces.
More, 8 at a minimum.
Okay.
And those would only fit on the property if they were tandem as well. If they would even fit, I don't think with the turning ratios, I haven't done the math, but I don't think they fit.
This seems like an awful, I don't know, I'm not going to redesign or anything, but it seems like if the back area of this is quite large, and there certainly must be a way to put 8 parking spaces on there. But
They would all be
that's really not the point, because you don't want to put a coffee shop on there.
No, but I'm
understand.
just
I
saying
understand
that if we kept the existing structure, the parking would have to be tandem if it fit. And if we asked for a continuance to add 2 more parking spots, they're all going to be tandem. There's no other way mathematically to put it together. So right now, I've heard concerns with tandem. If that's going to end up being a concern, then it's a difficult hurdle. And then the other thing is, Turnbull and Page, the historical consultants that helped us with this design, and they were actually, there was 3 historical consultants that were interviewed by the city. The city picked one. We've never actually worked directly with them. We worked through intermediary. To redesign this, we're going to have to go back, to the best of my knowledge, Nicole, and maybe you can enlighten me, to go back to Turnbull to say, guys, we got to go through more design on the building because we're changing it. That's, I think the continuance would be, the continuance would be, I think, the way to probably end the meeting. But please, Planning Commission, just keep keep in mind that the existing property doesn't meet parking criteria. So we're trying to create a legal conforming use where right now the only legal conforming use right now is the residence, as it's been sitting there for 110 years. I don't think we can go, I mean, if there was a possibility to get a residential zoning here, then we have two houses on the property that match each other, but it's commercial property. So it's just, you know, again, it's not simple, but the tandem parking is the only solution, whether we keep the existing structure or whether we continue on with this one.
Or tear down the existing structure and build a whole new.
Well, and so that was our original proposition. But because the property could be considered a historical resource, when we had the historical study on this property, it stated it is not a historical property, but could be considered a historical resource. So what we were told, we had to do a $150,000 EIR to figure out whether it was a historical resource or not, because it could be considered. So we like the idea of demoing it, but because we're, again, local and we like the preservation of older structures when we can do it, that's how we went down this avenue. So I don't think tearing that property down, it's not like it's certain. You have to go through whole EIRs and all that kind of stuff to even see if you can tear it down. Mm-hmm. And that's why we've been working with the city to, you know, to see if we can get this worked out. So I don't want to be.
So if we're hearing you correctly, you're open to continuing it. You know, you have some exploration to do, including putting a lesser number of rooms on the property, which would necessitate a smaller number of parking spaces. So I think we've been clear in what our concerns are. I think you've heard them clearly, and we hope that you take this opportunity to come back with a plan that works for you and your investors in this project. This is, you know, where we are now. So. With that being said, I think we're clear that you're open to continuance, and so I feel like we'll go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Do I need to reopen the public hearing because?
No, not to discuss that.
Okay. Public hearing closed. All right. Do I have a motion?
I move that we continue this matter to the next meeting or until the applicant can resubmit.
Yeah, I think we'll do a date uncertain to give them the time.
Okay. Then what date would that be?
To a date uncertain.
Uncertain.
Yeah.
To an uncertain date. Okay. All right. So I move to continue this item to an uncertain date.
Do I have a second? Okay. I have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please? On the motion to continue.
I'm trying to keep up over here with my notes. Commissioner Hoffman?
Yes?
Commissioner Rice?
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman?
Yes.
Chairperson Peterson?
Yes.
Motion carries to continue to a date uncertain.
Okay.